You talk a lot about the 5D. I know you talk about all nine dimensions, but a lot of what you talk about is like shifting into the 5D consciousness. So let's start there.
Yeah, we can look at 5D again from a macro perspective, what's happening with the planet and also within us. So let's maybe look at the macro first. So
Yes.
planet Earth, Mother Gaia is ascending, is on her process of healing and expanding too. And she's gone through many cataclysms before. She's also gone through many dark nights of the soul, things things that we experience in our lives too. But right now we are at a pivotal moment because basically around 13,000 years ago, we were at the age of Leo. That's when the fall of Atlantis happened. And the fall of Atlantis was one of the cataclysms. But basically what it meant is the Galactic Federation, which are star beings looking after Mother Earth and the galaxy, basically said, we need to reset. Like this is going too far. And so we were a 5D planet before that. But when they pressed the button reset, they sort of closed the connection with them, the connection with the rest of the galaxy. And I say closed because it's never really closed, but most of the beings here sort of forgot that we had this connection, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a 5D planet basically means there's more unity consciousness. So 5D consciousness, other words for it is unity consciousness, love as a state of consciousness, Christ consciousness, this idea of oneness. So there's more harmony, there's more connection, and not only among humanity, but also other beings as well, including Mother Earth. So there is a deep connection with all beings. And that was sort of shut off. And so since then, we've been in this reset mode, which we could call it a quarantine, like the one we experienced.
Yes. Lockdown.
Yeah, a lockdown that was much longer than what we've experienced. But it's also interesting to see that now we are at the age of Aquarius, and these gates are opening, and it's curious to see that we've also experienced a quarantine, and in that time, Mother Earth gave us some signs of, I'm healing, I'm bringing myself back into harmony, and you gotta get it together because I'm getting together. Right. And so I see
reflection, also, right? Yes.
Yeah. And I see Mother Earth, I see ourselves as the cells of that being. And so basically what's happening now, if she's going through her healing, her 5D ascension, which is very much related to the heart chakra, and the heart chakra. Some people say it's in England, some people say it's in Hawaii, but there is this shift happening with the planet. But because we're not separate, we're also being given the opportunity to receive the light that planet Earth has been receiving through our hearts. And so then going back to us, the micro, right? We are also having this opportunity to awaken and heal and expand our consciousness and really shift our perspective from the limited 3D. And again, the 3D is not necessarily bad. It's just that if you're just in the 3D world, it's going to be a very limited experience. It's going to be a human experience based on fear, based on duality, based on ego. It's very ego driven. And so when you start to awaken and heal and expand, that's when you're experiencing more 5D moments. And that means moments of love, moments of presence, and maybe even bliss. So I
Beautiful.
hope that makes some sense.
It does. And I actually like that you drew not necessarily the parallel, but you brought in about quarantine and everything, because everyone in the world has experienced the level of that. You know, that was a global event, something that was huge. And you also mentioned the word fear, which I want to touch on, because I think if you think about it, the panic and fear and all the emotions and discomfort and pain and all the things that came up in that lockdown, when a lot of people had, obviously some very, I'm not here to say who had this way and who had it that way, but we all had our experience through this. But there was a lot of fear that we could see in social media. We could see worldwide on news, something that in our generations, we never experienced before. So there was a lot of fear. I'm asking actually about you drawing the parallel from that event, let's call it, to the macrocosm, what's going on at a 5D level, because you spoke about it in reference to maybe losing the connection or not having the access, or not necessarily accessing. We have the access, but not necessarily accessing this 5D energy and frequency and consciousness. So what's that kind of parallel there? If you could kind of pull from that, I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, totally. I think that what's coming to mind now is to talk about the one in between the 3D and 5D, which is 4D.
Okay.
And 4D is I think it's very interesting, very kind of complex, because there are different aspects to that dimension. And you could, coming from a very linear mind, because that's how we understand things, but that's not really how things happen. And it's something I always say, because we think of 3D, 5D, we're going up or going down. It's less linear than what I'm sharing, but I do share in a linear fashion, because that's how
we will understand it. Yeah.
So if we're coming from a linear thinking, you could see 4D very connected to that 3D duality, but also the higher 4D is almost there in that 5D love and oneness. But actually, there's a lot of shadow and light dance that happens in 4D.
Yeah, that kind of crossover, right?
Yeah. And so there is a lot of chaos that may happen, that we see happening outside of us, but also in our lives. And if we're again bringing back to the micro, before you awaken, or you might go through a moment of grief or a moment of pain, like we were mentioning a hurricane, but there is a light aspect to that, because the next step for you is going to be evolution, is going to be an opening of the heart. Again, from a 3D perspective, and also thanks to a lot of lyrics, we say that our heart is broken. But from a 5D perspective, your heart can never be broken. It can be open more and more. And I think it's Rumi that said that light enters through the cracks of your heart.
Yes.
Right. And so maybe it's not nice to hear that, but we need to go through that chaos, through that darkness, through whatever is happening in the world that you see from a 3D perspective. Yes, there are horrible things happening, but it's the way through to get there. And even the word darkness changes its frequency as you move through the dimensions, because from a 3D perspective, darkness is evil, is negative, is something that's chaotic, it's painful. From a 4D perspective, you start to see that there is another side. Yes. It's almost as if it's two sides of the same coin. There is a shadow, there's the darkness, but there is a light, and they coexist.
Yes.
And when you move through that 5D level of consciousness or 5D perspective, you understand that darkness is as divine as light, that actually darkness is the divine feminine,
Mm-hmm.
the divine feminine energy
Yes.
that we need to create everything.
Yes. That void, that nothingness within all possibility exists. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because when you
Yeah.
think of, and the ninth dimension is the black hole of the Milky Way, it
Mm.
is the beginning and the end of
Mm-hmm.
this galaxy and the other galaxy. And again, we see in our own creation, that's what happens too. We need the
Yes.
feminine energy, that's the darkness, and we need the
Yes.
masculine energy, which is the light, but we need both to create life.
Exactly. I love, love, love that. And what's interesting for me as you speak about some of those things, I mean, you quoted Rumi. I love Rumi. My mom always used to say, and she said this to me not long ago, so it's quite vibrant in my mind, that it's something along along the lines of your heart breaks so that God can shine His light through. Now, I love the word through that you used a few times, because often when people are going through distress or pain or whatever word feels hard as a challenge, everyone will have their own anxious, sad, whatever it might be, all different emotions or, traumas. We have a lot of this. It's really hard. And the only way is through.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me, when we spoke about surrender before, those were some of the moments for me that were so beautiful because they were so hard, or because it was painful, or and this and that, that I could say to myself, there's no way to avoid this, but even if I could, I choose to go through the eye of the needle, because I know that you, as you're saying, that cracking open is needed. It's needed for our growth. It's needed for our evolution. And if only we could just surrender to it, as hard as it can be sometimes. And not, when I say surrender to it, to what we're going through, not necessarily external circumstances, but our own internal thermostat, then I think there's so much that we could all achieve through the hard things that happen in life. And it's such a beautiful way of looking at it. I love the interweaving that you're doing with these dimensions. So, and also that you're making it very practical, because how do we bring these practices into our life? So some of the work you do, and even if you talk about something other than 5D, but let's just throw 5D back in the mix, you speak about helping people shift into this or shift into that. So what are some of the things that people would have to do, or the practices to help that shift occur?